the threat of institutionalization. That's coming for everybody if we don't protect that. And yeah, the funding is important and continuing to do the work, but I have to ask myself every day, would I do this work if I wasn't paid to do it? Would it still be important to me? And the answer is yes. So that's more important because if we can't keep people out of institutions, we're not doing our thing.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Accessibility Now, a podcast where we focus on what's going on in the state of Georgia in terms of disability rights, and sometimes reach out to other states to find out what's going on there and to collaborate and share ideas. And so this morning, my guest is Mel Leviton, director of the Idaho SILC. So why don't we just start with you giving us a little bit of a background about yourself and how long you've been in the position and kind of what drew you to the work.
Oh, let's see. So, I've been with the Idaho SILC, I think 12 years this summer, which seems impossible to be here that long, but here I am. Prior to coming to the Idaho SILC, I was with Disability Rights Idaho, the protection and advocacy system for Idaho. And there I was, when I left, I was a lead investigator of abuse and neglect, primarily in institutions. And then I managed two grants, the voting rights, the HAVA, Help America Vote Act, and did a lot of voting projects throughout the state. And I also coordinated the assistive tech grant, which is a pretty small grant. So I was there for 13 years. When I started with them, I was in a small town in northern Idaho, and then transferred down to Boise, which is our only metro area in the state. So that's that professional background, and I have other stuff back there. I taught adult education um to at a technical school at Idaho State University for students who um often had learning disabilities. And so they were studying to be mechanics or cosmetologists or whatever, and just putting together uh, really what they needed to be able to do to like make an invoice, order supplies, that kind of thing. So um enjoyed that a lot. I did a stint with the Social Security Administration um when I um when I first became physically disabled. I kind of um really had to regroup and start kind of at zero. So when I was able to go back to work, I worked in well, first I washed dishes, which was a blow to my ego. Uh, and then I got involved in direct care and vocational training for people with intellectual disabilities and brain injuries. So, left that job because of the rampant fraud. And anyway, that's it's kind of all over the place.
Wow, yeah, you've done a lot. You've done a
A little
lot.
bit. A little
Yeah.
bit.
So, would you mind? I mean, I guess this is a little bit more on the personal story side of things, but would you mind kind of sharing about that a little more about that experience of becoming disabled and what that transition was like and what resources were available to you?
Well, I was already disabled. I just didn't really recognize it as disabled. So I had significant language processing challenges, I guess, for lack of a better word. Um, so I had that, but I had learned to function with it. Like I'm old, so when I went to school, there wasn't special education. There was the coat closet where the kids who had trouble reading had to go, and Um, I did not speak much or very well, until, really, like, 2nd grade. Um, so when like I said, I didn't really recognize that, and then when I was in junior high and high school, um, I had some other significant, really, things going on. So I did a lot of self-medicating and was institutionalized multiple time. But again, didn't really think of that as disability. It just wasn't in my head. Um, but the physical disability, um, when I got a virus, it took a long time to figure out that the virus is what caused I'm a paraplegic now. Um, and Um, it was just really it was a blow to my ego, it was a blow to my, I mean, ego is part of psyche, but it was just a blow. Um, and so, you know, then being relegated to I used the crutches and then finally gave up and used a wheelchair because I was tired of breaking bones, um, and dragging myself around. I remember I went to This is really meaningful to me. So I went to a conference in Colorado for the protection and advocacy system, and there was an attorney there, um, who had spina bifida, and she used a wheelchair. And this is after I'd been using a wheelchair for quite a while. I didn't go to rehab like a lot of people who are injured do. I didn't do that. So nobody had ever like taught me the ins and outs of using a wheelchair. And this woman, we went down, like, I was like, she'd zip through all over the place with her coffee cup. And I was just in total admiration of her skill doing that. I was like, can you teach me how to do that? And anyway, she, she did. And it was like the greatest gift. I can't tell you how, like, just being able to carry my coffee through a crowded room, and not spill too much of it. And something about that, like, shifted stuff in me. And it was a lot of what we talk about, just in independent living. It was like, I finally had the courage to ask. There was the right person in the right place at the right time. Um, and it just being able to manage a room with a cup of coffee was just free. And I was like, "Well, hell yeah, I can do stuff still." Um, and so that really was but I was using a wheelchair, I'm sure for at least 5 years. That just shifted everything in me. I think it was the being able to ask for help and the person there willing to provide the teaching piece, was just really like, that was my turning point, which sounds weird, but, if you're gonna have an epiphany, it might as well have it for coffee.
I mean, to me, that sounds like peer mentorship,
Mm,
you know?
yeah, it really was. It really was. I just had other opportunities, like, I mean, I went into institutions. I frequently met with people, um in mental health institutions. So there were 3 young women who were deaf, um, 2 people with it it was very challenging to understand what they were saying, um, and then, um, couple of other kids with other disabilities, plus some mobility stuff thrown in, and so we had the ASL interpreters with our group, um and it was really clear 2 minutes, and the ASL interpreters couldn't understand the 2 kids with the speech difficulty, and after just a couple of minutes, I was just like, "Shit, I am not gonna figure out how this is gonna work." So I just kinda backed up, and they figured it out in 5 minutes, and it was it was magic. It was just magic because here you've got these young people, 16, 17, 18 years old. and they just been and they didn't know each other. The 3 young women, they went to the school for the deaf and blind here, so they knew each other, but they didn't know the other kids, but they're all there just, like, figured it out. And I think that's so often what we miss. Like, if we just get out of the way because we think we know the way to do it, when we can get out I know for me anyway, when I can just get out of the way and watch the magic of other people doing it, and it was total you could have labeled it peer support or whatever. It didn't need a label. It was magic is what it was. Um, and that's something that's always stick with me. You talk about those moments where you shift. And that was one of those moments. And I was just lucky to be in lots of those little moments, I think. And just see the magic of other people, especially younger people. I think it's I get really frustrated when people uh, they have an idea of how young leaders should be. Um, a- and that idea doesn't give those young leaders the space to just be. And they're so great at just being. Like, why the hell do we need to dictate how that ought to be? I don't know. I'm not explaining that very well, but
No, you you are, at least to my ears, and I mean, leadership is such an important issue right now, and I mean, young leadership in particular,
right.
because it feels like we're in a moment, or it doesn't feel like it. We're in a moment where a lot of things are under threat, funding, Medicaid funding, all sorts of issues that we're facing, and we need to make sure that the younger leadership is ready and knows the stories from the older leadership to help us dig in and, you know, figure out how to gain power, resist power, all these
Right.
things.
I think I have a great appreciation for the importance of having a council that is really cross disability. We work very hard, and right now we're really struggling, but we work really hard to make sure significant disabilities are represented. So we have people with intellectual disabilities, we have people with autism, we have people who are deaf, we have people who are blind, we have people with mental health disabilities, we have people with physical disabilities, um, from all over the state. And again, it's just magical to watch them during a meeting, learn from each other. Again, I can just get out of the way, um, and they do this stuff. So, but yeah, there are challenges, but there are also great things to see.
Absolutely. Um, and I'm always curious to ask this of people that work at other silks or sills, even. How would you define, because it's a little tricky for outsiders to kind of understand the difference between a silk and a sill. So
Right.
how would you define what a silk does, where, you know, the sill provides direct services to folks, but the silk is a little different. So can you define that for us?
Oh, sure. That's the mystery question that could take us, 8 hours. So silk, silks don't do it. I get frustrated sometimes. I hear silks don't do anything. It's like, what? Have you considered that silks are not funded? Um, I think so. I think it's really important for silk to understand, and that's the whole council and whatever staff you're able to have. Um, that they're not providing oversight to what the centers do, that they're working, um, on a different on a in a different ways, and so primarily systemic issues, uh, and I think the way every state finds it is uniquely different, depending on if the silk has funding. So the variety of funding streams for silks, like, you have The Silk in, the Mariana Islands, they have no funding, 0. Uh, so we're pretty well funded, Ohio's pretty well funded, but our funding here in Idaho is under significant threat. Just because we get some state funding in addition to we get innovation and expansion money and Part B money, which is gonna go down that rabbit hole. Um, so it just depends largely on the state, for people really having a good understanding of the Rehab Act and how those roles are set out. The roles are pretty clear in the Rehab Act. Like, here's what the centers do, and here's what a SILC does. A SILC tries to work toward coordinating a plan with the centers and trusting the centers to know what they need and the people what they need. So we have in our bylaws and our statutes that we will do systems advocacy, that we will educate decision makers. Um, so I think and centers do that too. Um, but we don't do it, and I think that's what can be challenging for some silks is to we don't provide direct services. If we're given a referral, it's to a center. That's who we're giving a referral to. And we always tell people if you don't find what you need there, give us a call back. We can point you in another way. If it's obviously something that needs to go to the protection and advocacy system and they talk to me, that's probably where I'm going to send them. I'm not going to send somebody. And I know that fringes on being information and referral, but I'm a firm believer that usually by the time somebody calls us, they're pretty desperate because we're not easy to find. We don't have disability in our name. State Independent Living Council is a little misleading.
So, what do you think, with that as context, what do you think advocacy collaboration could look like across states? Like, for instance, between Georgia and Idaho, or maybe it would be more regional, but do you see any opportunities for collaboration?
Oh, I absolutely. Um, we've tossed around here, and I've talked to a couple other silk directors and silk staff and council members in other states just about um, how can we better partner, like say in a disaster. California does great stuff around fires, but we see every time in fires, if a community gets overrun, it's the old and disabled that get left behind. Um, and that's just how that is. And how can we partner together? Maybe there are some things we've learned here and some things you've learned and some things California's learned, and you roll them all together and tweak them a little bit for your area, and that's helpful. So I think that's one way. Because advocacy is all about education, so it's, letting people know the importance of people being able to get out. Um, in other instances, we've reached out a lot, we being the Idaho SILC and the Idaho DD Council. We work a lot with them. Um, I've known their director for 20 plus years, and we've done a lot of work together over the years. And so Idaho is looking at really revamping and changing Medicaid, especially HCBS, home and community based services. And so we've reached out to other states. So I've reached out to the Tennessee SILC director, and the Ohio SILC director, and then they've connected me to people in their states. We actually just had our first listening session for a statewide assessment last week. And that was one of the things that somebody brought up. He was like, HCBS, when I first got injured, which was quite some time ago now, um, his first year after his accident, he got 3 wheelchairs, Medicaid gave him lotion, like there were plenty of people to help him. He's a quadriplegic, so he needed some substantial in-home support. And of course, none of those things exist now. And so really thinking, I think a lot of times we've been looking at, okay, what's working, what's not, but what used to work? What used to work that's really, and how could we get some of that back? We're always scrambling to hang on to the little threads we have, but why
Mhm.
aren't we going after that bigger piece of the things that actually worked? We knew it improved outcomes. We know it helped people live longer. This guy who brought it up is in his mid 50s. Now he was injured when he was 16. Um, so why aren't we doing some of that too? And I think that and working together across the state because we have lots of similar problems. Um, and I think there are pockets all over the place that have found good solutions. And how can we bring those to maybe we can't bring it to the whole state of Idaho, but maybe we can bring it to a corner of Idaho. Um, And I think where silks have a real advantage is because we are kind of this bigger picture. We maybe hear more about what's going on in the country. And I know I've connected our SIL folks here to SIL folks in other states that I've met through silks or that I've asked, hey, do you know? Um, and then they're connecting. And I just think the more we connect, because while there are a lot of us, there are also, at the same time, not that many of us, if that makes any sense at all. And really just having a more interconnected opportunities to interconnect, I think I can
Mhm.
really do that kind of work and lift up. Again, for me, it's home and community-based services. Like right now, we're hearing a lot about funding cuts to possibly silks and to DD councils and the protection and advocacy system. And those things are a big deal. But to me, the really big deal is the cuts to home and community based services and the threat of institutionalization, because that's coming for everybody if we don't protect that. And yeah, the funding is important and continuing to do the work, but I have to ask myself every day, would I do this work if I wasn't paid to do it? Would it still be important to me? And the answer is yes. So that's more important because if we can't keep people out of institutions, then we're not we're not doing our thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. No, that was great. Yeah, institutionalization is the kind of the opposite of independent living. So we
right?
we want to stay away from that.
Yeah, and I don't know
Um,
about you guys, but we're getting more and more institutions and institutional like settings, communities that are built just for people with intellectual disabilities who have parents who have money, um, things like that, and they're very segregated.
yeah,
Um,
that's awful. Um, so my last question would be if you could leave one piece of uh wisdom or a takeaway for our listeners, what would it be? What would you really want to communicate?
wow, one thing, as
You
long
can
as
do
it's not much, huh?
you can
Um,
do two.
I I I just think connecting with each other. We're stronger together. It's very cliche and it's also very true. And connect with others. Don't just get out of the just disability thinking. During COVID, we partnered with over 80 different organizations. They were not disability organizations. Yeah, we did partner with disability organizations, but it took everybody to get through that.
Mm,
Um, and I think now in particular, we need to remember that it takes everybody. When we had the 504 demonstration in California, we get help from everybody. Black Panthers brought food, queer groups brought food, people shuttled in medical stuff. Um, it wasn't just disability; it was a social justice movement, and we
mhm.
have to remember disability is within every community. every community, every or I remember doing voting rights, and this was years and years ago. And I contacted a local League of Women Voters and wanted to do some um, disability voting training in concert with them. And they were kind of backwards thinking. And they were like, well, we don't have any of those people. Like, okay. Um, Everybody has disabled people. Everybody. So to not reach out to all the groups, they just use different words. Different cultures use different words to describe disability. I never had words to put on all the stuff that went on with me when I was younger. I didn't have those words. Um, and um, so I think get out of our box, get out of our disability box because we're everywhere. And when we don't get out of our disability box, we miss all of the all of the connections. And I think it's with all those spider webby connections, I kind of see things in spider webby connections. Um, that then I think we can make progress and not just solely focus on this uh, social justice. When we have social justice, we'll have disability justice.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that goes back to the intersectional kind of piece of this, that all these things are tied together. And I'm very glad to be part of your spider web now. So
I am too. Thanks, Matt.
yeah, thanks so much, Mel, for taking the time